Gentlemen, Marvel Rivals Season 1 has brought all kinds of balance changes. We got nerfs, we got buffs. We're going to look at all of those right now and figure out which characters are still worth playing. I'm going to break this video down into Vanguard, Duelists, Strategists, and team-ups so you can jump around and do whatever you want. First up, we have America's Gat, Captain America. His shield restoration to late time after releasing Living Legend has been dropped from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. His Liberty Rush cooldown has been dropped from 12 seconds to 10 seconds. He's got a slight increase in base health from 650 to 675. His energy cost for releasing Freedom Charge is now 3400 to 3100, and he got some additional health provided per second drop from 110 to 100. Overall, this is a pretty solid buff for Cap. I wish we could have seen a little bit more health, but 675 is not too bad. They definitely made it more mobile, which I believe was the goal. Next up, we've got Doctor Strange with an overall nerf here, thank God. They added damage fall off to the Maelstrom of Madness and the Gamma Maelstrom, starting at 5 meters and then reducing to 70% at 8 meters. And they slightly decreased the shield value recovery rate after you release it from 80 per second to 70 per second. Now listen, Doctor Strange was a meta tank in ranked in Season 0. I don't see that changing, but at least he'll be a little bit more balanced now. They hit us with a Hulk nerf, reducing the Gamma Shield value from 250 down to 200. Honestly, pretty good call in my opinion. We got a Thor buff, increasing base health from 500 to 525 and added immunity to control effects during God of Thunder, which he should have had in the beginning. And the last Vanguard to get a buff is my boy, the GOAT with the Gat Venom. They increased his symbiotic resilience bonus health ratio from 1 to 1.2, and they increased the base damage of Feast of the Abyss from 40 to 50. Not crazy numbers, but my boy did something. He was really lagging behind in the tank game. Up next, we have our Duelists. There's a ton of changes here, so I'm going to speed through relatively quickly. Up first, we've got Black Panther with a nerf. They reduced the additional health provided to himself after refreshing Vibranium Marks from 40 to 30, and the upper limit of additional health provided from 120 to 75. A long anticipated buff for a lot of Widow mains. Here it is. Increased range of the first effective Edge Dancer from 3 meter radius to a 5 meter radius. They reduced the time required for Fleetfoot to recover from 12 seconds to 4 seconds, which is a huge buff there. And they reduced the time required for the Electroplasma Explosion to reach maximum power from 1 second to 0.6 seconds. A much needed buff in my opinion. I hope this makes her more useful. And thank God we've got the Hawkeye nerf here, slightly reducing the spread angle between every 2 blast arrows, reducing the trigger distance of passive ability archers focus from 60 down to 40 meters, and reducing the maximum additional damage of the passive from 80 to 70. Again, Hawkeye's been a ban or an insta-lock on ranked, so hopefully this kind of levels the playing field out a little bit. Another anticipated nerf, but not as crazy as I honestly thought it would be. We have Hela getting her health reduced from 275 down to 250. So she did get a little bit more of a nerf down in the team ups. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. I honestly thought they'd do a little bit more to her. Coming in with a magic buff, we have increased umbral incursion damage from Darkchild form from 115 up to 135. We got a Moon Knight buff, increasing the number of talons generated by hand of Khonshu from 10 to 14, and increase the explosion radius of each talon from 4 meters up to 5. We got a Namor buff here, adjusting the throwing feel of Monstro Spawn and Frozen Spawn. Now Namor can more accurately throw them to the desired location. I never played Namor, so I wasn't really aware that this was an issue, but thankfully we're now throwing with somewhat accuracy. Up next, we've got the Psylocke nerf. Dance of the Butterfly will now check for barriers, including Magneto shield, Hulk shield. I don't really understand why this wasn't a thing before. She was just phasing through shields and doing damage. I think this is a great change. I'm sorry, Psylocke mains. Up next, we have a Punisher buff, which slightly reduces the spread on both of his primary and secondary weapons. We have a Scarlet Witch buff. We increased Chaos Control fixed damage from 50 to 60. We reduced the percentage DPS from 5% to 3%, and we increased the Satanian burst projectile damage from 30 to 35. Doesn't seem like anything crazy here, but a little bit of a buff. I know y'all been waiting for this one, the Squirrel Girl buff. So her unbeatable Squirrel Tsunami squirrels now rush towards the nearest enemy after bouncing instead of just randomly bouncing around. And then it's reduced the Squirrel Tsunami health from 600 to 300. So yeah, it's got less health, but now it's actually heading towards enemies with somewhat accuracy. Overall, it probably should have been this way to begin with. Up next, we have a Storm buff, and she needed this so bad, boys. Increasing Windblade projectile speed from 100 meters to 150 meters per second, and left click damage went up from 50 to 55. She's now got increased bolt rush damage from 70 to 80, and after releasing Omega Hurricane, the bonus health she gets has been increased from 350 to 450. And the extra health no longer vanishes instantly, but it'll start to diminish at a rate of 100 per second. This is great. I felt like Storm was super weak before. I hope this puts her more into the rotation. We've got a little bit of a mixed buff and nerf here for the Winter Soldier. It increased the bonus health provided from Bionic Hook and Tainted Voltage from 30 to 40. It increases his projectile damage from 70 to 75. It did reduce the area damage from 70 to 65 and the damage decay from 65% at 40 meters to 60%. And his base health has been increased from 250 to 275. All in all, seems like a pretty fair balance. And lastly, we've got the sleeper hero Wolverine. Started finding some traction towards the end of the season there, got a buff and a nerf. They increased his base health from 300 to 350, which I feel like he needed, and reduced the damage reduction ratio provided by Undying Animal from 50% to 40%. All in all, I think good changes here. Next up, we're moving into our strategists. First up, the buff for Cloak and Dagger. We've got reducing Dagger Storm cooldown from 15 seconds to 12 seconds, and we increased the number of dashes in Eternal Bond from 3 to 4. I already thought Cloak and Dagger was pretty good. I think with these changes, it makes him a little bit more of a pick. But honestly, don't really think they needed anything. I have been waiting on this one, boys. Finally, Jeff has a little bit of a buff, but a lot more of a nerf, okay? They've adjusted Jeff's ultimate. Rather than being a 10-meter sphere to a 10-meter radius that's only 5 meters high. So now, people who are flying above it or trying to escape it from the aerial direction are going to be dragged in for miles, okay? It did, however, increase the healing of Joyful Splash from 140 per second to 150. All in all, I'm so glad they adjusted his ult because that was just crazy. You could not escape this thing, boys. I think this is a fair balance. Next up, we have Luna. Nerf here increased the interval for switching between healing and damage in Fate of Both Worlds from 0.1 second to 0.5 seconds. Not a crazy nerf here, but probably balance her out just a little bit more. Next up, we have a Mantis nerf. This makes me so sad. We've reduced Nature's Favor, which is her passive movement boost, from 2.5 meters per second to 1.5 meters per second. Nothing too crazy here, but a nerf like this hitting one of the top character win rates in ranked makes you wonder how everything's going to play out now, especially with Invisible Woman coming into the rotation. And lastly, I definitely thought this was needed. Rocket got a buff, increasing the healing of repair mode from 60 per second to 70 per second. Rocket just really wasn't a great healer right now. I'm not saying he's a great one after this buff, but I do think it's going to be somewhat helpful. And finally, moving into all of the buffs and nerfs for the team ups. Now I'm going to explain something a little bit that I was confused about here first. So in the game, the anchor of the team who actually gives out the buff gets a season bonus. So for example here, Allied Agents is getting a nerf that reduces Hawkeye's season bonus from 20% down to 15%. I was first wondering, why are we making seasonal buff changes when we're going into a new season? I think it's just a really bad name right now. This is just like the anchor bonus. You're not actually getting the ability, you're getting a buff for being the anchor of the team. With that being said, a lot of these team up changes are going to make pretty big impacts. So like I said, Allied Agents, Hawkeye is getting a reduction from 20% damage to 15% damage increase. Ammo Overload with Rocket, the Punisher, and Winter Soldier actually got a buff that reduces the cooldown of Ammo Invention from 45 seconds down to 40 seconds. Chilling Charisma with Luna, Namor, and Jeff got a buff, increasing Frozen Spawn damage from 25 to 27, increasing Frozen Spawn slowing effect applied to the enemies that were hit from 25 to 30, and increasing Berserk State Frozen Spawn damage from 16 up to 18. Metallic Chaos, the team up between Scarlet Witch and Magneto, increases Metallic Fusion projectile damage from 55 up to 60, and increased the Metallic Fusion spell field damage from 30 up to 35. Finally, we get to the second part of the Hela nerf. We have Ragnarok Rebirth with Hela as the anchor, Loki and Thor as the beneficiaries. We've reduced Hela's season bonus from 20% down to 15%. This, mixed with her personal nerf she already got, I really think this is going to kind of level the playing field for her. She still has the hit scan though, so there's that. We got a buff for Voltaic Union with Thor being the anchor, Storm and Captain America being the beneficiaries. It has reduced the cooldown of Charge Gale from 20 seconds to 15 seconds and increase the damage of charge scale from 50 to 55. Now, I don't really think this is impacting Captain America, but I think it is making Storm a lot better, especially with this team up. That's every single change happening in Season 1. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. Drop a sub for even more Marvel Rivals content, and have a great day.